The fall of Afghanistan has sent thousands of panicked Afghans scrambling to flee the country, but it has also panicked several politicians who are terrified of another mass movement of asylum seekers. But European nations, including some West Asian countries, have been bringing in hundreds of refugees every day. With the crisis escalating, the refugees, especially women and children, are facing tough situations. To begin with Qatar, these are the visuals from the Qatar hangar. The Afghanistan refugees have been displaced to this small area with only one shower and one bathroom. The visuals are compelling. This looks like a mess, with nearly 100 people crammed inside the small hall-like room. Evacuees from Afghanistan have landed in Warsaw after being flown in by the Polish airlines. Poland has airlifted around 50 people from Afghanistan, including a deputy foreign minister. Poland had said it has around 100 people on an evacuation list, but the plane carried just 50. In Spain, a European External Action Service plane carrying 5 Afghan families has landed in Spain's Torrejón airport after departing from Rome. This plane arrived with people who had worked with EU institutions in Afghanistan for years. Another plane arrived in Spain carrying the 53 people, including 5 Spanish diplomats. The remaining 48 are citizens and their families who had worked for Spain in Afghanistan. Spain had offered to create a hub for the hundreds of Afghan refugees to be airlifted out of Kabul to the European Union. Spain plans to airlift around 500 people, including Spanish embassy staff, their families and Afghans who worked with them. Meanwhile, in England, an aircraft carrying refugees and British nationals from Afghanistan arrived at an airport in the Midlands. The British government has claimed that they have relocated more than 2,000 Afghan under the Relocation and Assistance Policy Programme since the month of April. The immediate priority for the UK government is to evacuate the 4,000 of its citizens and the thousands of Afghan allies. Johnson's so-called generous refugee settlement programme would allow up to 20,000 vulnerable Afghans to seek sanctuary in the UK in the next few years. Moving on to Italy, an Air Force jet has ferried 86 passengers from Kabul to Rome's main airport. The country's foreign ministry has said that the passengers included Italians as well as Europeans and NATO personnel. Afghan citizens who worked and their family members who also have been ferried along with the officials. This flight was the second mission by Italy this week. Officials have said that Italy would deploy a total of 7 military jets to fly passengers out of Kabul airport. Meanwhile, Turkey is afraid of a refugee crisis, has reinforced its border with Iran. This is an attempt to stop a potential influx of Afghans fleeing the country on ground. Irregular arrivals from Turkish borders are already up as Afghans who fled months ago have started showing up at the rugged border. After a long trek across Iran, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has admitted that Turkey faces a new refugee wave from Afghanistan and said that his government would work with Pakistan to bring stability in the war-ravaged country. Turkey is already home to some 4 million migrants, mostly from Syria. Anti-migration sentiment is already running high in the country as it grapples with the economic woes. Some media have reported that up to 1,000 migrants have been crossing the border with Iran every day. Peter Galbraith, the former Assistant Secretary of the United Nations in Afghanistan and the former U.S. Ambassador to Croatia, joined U.S. Live. Let's listen into what he had to say.
The U.S. forces are at the airport. They are attempting to facilitate departure, not only of American citizens, other foreign citizens, but also of Afghans who worked with the United States, with the militaries, the NATO militaries, the embassies. And I think I'm hoping this will be expanded to include the staff of the United Nations, those who want to leave, those who work with international humanitarian organizations, NGOs, and journalists, because there's a whole generation of Afghan journalists who were trained in more Western style of reporting and journalism, and they too are at significant risk. In terms of the humanitarian disaster, well, this is something that is both immediate, because the Taliban takeover caused a lot of people to flee their homes, and there are a lot of people who want to get out of the country. But it's going to be a long-term disaster as well, because the previous government of Afghanistan depended hugely on international financial assistance, development aid, and that's not going to exist. Furthermore, the United States has frozen the assets of Afghanistan, since it doesn't consider the Taliban to be a legitimate government, at least not at this point. And that too is going to make things very difficult. So the economy of Afghanistan, which again is now been heavily dependent on international support and trade, it's going to be collapsing. And that's going to be a huge problem, particularly for the large part of the Afghan population who began to connect. I'm talking about the people in the cities, particularly in Kabul, who began to connect with the other economies of South Asia and with the global economy.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.